Hello, everybody. This is Justin Case of American Newscape, rejoining our friend Scott Dudley and his sidekick Luna for American Consciousness. Hello, Scott. Welcome back to American Newscape.
Justin, so glad to be here. Listeners, so glad to be here. And yeah, Luna's over on my left-hand side today.
Okay.
I take a piece of tape and I tape up the phone so that it's in the right spot for the framing. And today I had taped the tape to the table while I was kind of taking some notes. And Luna figured it out, and she came down and she chewed up that piece of tape, and she's still hanging out guarding it.
It was not Luna approved, so to speak.
She's a tape eater. I don't know where she got that from, but she loves Amazon.
Okay.
Packages come in, those are hers.
Okay, Scott. Now I'm here for my therapy session, and you told me you were going to help me get in touch with this. So, shattered dreams.
Right.
What are they all about?
So, we talked a little bit about our attraction to crushed hopes last week, and that was kind of interesting, but it walked right up to the edge of something a little bit different. And that is something kind of a little bit more profound than a crushed hope, than the Chicago Cubs. But more serious, and maybe something that we could be aware of. And so it kind of came up, and we thought about it, and thought, let's go for this. Shattered dreams. It is, first of all, in talking to people, I kind of figured this out. You may be sitting there right now going, I don't have any shattered dreams. And if that's the case, hey, congratulations. No, because not everybody has them, and that was one of the first things I learned today. Was that not everybody experiences shattered dreams, or files it that way in their head. That doesn't mean that they haven't had really awful stuff happen to them. They just didn't take it and say, this dream of mine has ended, and my life's never going to be the same. So they didn't file it that way. So if that's the case, yeah, you consider yourself fortunate. Whistle past the graveyard, and keep trucking, because there's no rule that says that you have to experience this. But for many people, they have experienced it. It's changed their life profoundly, and I dare say for some people it was a gift.
Yes.
Man, having my dreams shattered, how could that be a gift? I heard from some people that once these life-changing events happened, and some of them were really awful, they were able to come in touch with parts of themselves and understand their life better and reprioritize. So, and at the end of the day, you could say, it's not a gift that I wanted. It's not something I asked for, but it took me to a better place. So there you go.
Well,
so let's start with scope.
Okay.
We were talking a little bit before we came on the show, and I know my inability to develop a professional sports career didn't count as a shattered dream, because it was erosion. It was slow and steady. And one day I woke up and I was, 22 or whatever, and I was, what? This NBA career is not going to work out. I'm a starter on a community recreation league, which actually was pretty good in Lansing, Michigan. But the Pistons aren't calling me. The Lakers aren't calling me. The Suns aren't calling me. And at that point, it was like, oh, this isn't going to, because when you're a kid growing up, I don't know about you, Justin, but when I was a kid growing up, I kind of was looking at sports stars and thinking, this would be cool. I could do this. And it didn't happen. But it didn't drop suddenly. I talked to a person this week who probably was good enough to be a professional athlete and had that goal and had that kind of in their sights, and then they blew out their knee. And they blew out their knee, but blew out their knee.
Yeah.
They now have an artificial knee. And that was it for them. And they had really it paused them big time because they had really kind of foreseen themselves going into this future that they'd anticipated, and it was their lifelong dream. From the time they were a little kid, they dedicated all sorts of time and energy to making this thing happen. And they woke up after surgery, and in 6 months they realized this is not going to happen. And then they had to kind of go back to it. But it's not erosion; it's something sudden. So if you're sitting there kind of sorting this out in your own life and mind, think of stuff that really hit hard and hit fast, right? And not hope or wish or want. I was really hoping we could stop for hamburgers tonight on the way home. That's not a dream. We're talking about scale here, right? Dreams are big. You know, this is going to be my family. This is going to be my relationship to my parent as they age. This is going to be my career. And all of a sudden, it's not. So we're really talking about, but the big stuff. And then it's ultimately, if it's going to be a shattered dream, shattered implies something catastrophic. So shattered implies not just like pick yourself up, dust yourself off, and start all over again. Shattered implies that you're going to have to really do some heavy lifting, and you are never going to be the same. So at the end of a year, at the end of 2 years, at the end of 5 years, at the end of a decade, you're not going to be going, well, that's over. Back to work. It's not going to be that way. It's going to be, I'm older, I'm wiser. The scars have taught me something, but the scars are there. So really, when we're talking about that, that's kind of where we're at. What are your thoughts in terms of that level and in terms of that profound impact on people?
Well, I think it does. It is a profound impact. I think certain things fall into that category, like having your house burned down, catastrophic earthquake. I don't put the hurricanes in that category because you have a week to watch them come in, so it's not like sudden impact. But sports, I'm not buying that because if you're dedicated to sports, one day it's so fleeting, it's going to be gone. And it doesn't matter who you are. Michael Jordan, Tom Brady, one day they can't answer the bell.
Some of them struggle with that, though.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And I was kind of blessed. I was involved in a lot of sports and I walked away from them. And in my mind, it was time, and I didn't have that withdrawal. I didn't have that regret. And I don't know if that was because of my upbringing or me not tying my cart to that horse.
So you're able to kind of detach from those normal kind of shifts and changes.
I think I always was able to, and Luna's tail. That's a change that I have to adapt to, and it's okay. But yeah, it was, and maybe for me it was a lot of denial. Maybe it was there was so much, I saw so much on the horizon that I was anxious to head off into that specific sunset, so to speak.
Interesting. Yeah, I think it's interesting for us because I kind of put myself in the same boat. I've had some fairly interesting things happen in my life. I don't think I ever really owned up to it as shattered dreams.
Yeah.
I never wanted to be that in depth to like a possibility.
Right.
That if the possibility dried up and blew away, that I wasn't somehow going to be okay at the end of it. That being said, high school girlfriend breakup was pretty tough.
Wow. With all those girls out there, one breakup set you back. But
Too many fish or there's a lot of fish in the sea. It's like you just can't hear that when your forever thing is not a forever thing anymore.
well, I may not have enough compassion with regard to this topic, but I don't discount others' shattered dreams, because I have witnessed lots of people that can stagnate and just be horrifically set back in their lives because of an occasion or an occurrence, such as sudden death. Sudden death of a loved one can have far reaching and long term effects on people.
That bounced up a whole bunch as I was talking about it this week, and I think you bring up a really good point, and it's a point that flexes itself through a number of different things, and that is uh, our life experiences are subjective, and that means that there's no real scale of you know, what counts as a shattered dream to me might not count as a shattered dream to somebody else. They may laugh it off. It may be a zero, but something that they count as a shattered dream will be the same way to me. One of the places that we see this is in some people who are thinking about suicide. Their losses have stacked up, their shattered dreams have stacked up to the point where they just don't want to go on anymore. They're thinking of killing themselves. And this can be as you sit down with a person like this and talk about it and say, this is really serious, isn't it? So you've got this and this and this, and it's so bad that you're thinking of killing yourself. And that and the this and this and this are things that we've shrugged off a dozen times. It could be a breakup, it could be financial problems, it could be some sort of lifestyle alteration. Like uh, I'm an aging person. Someday I may not be able to walk anymore. I walk a lot. I value walking. Walking is my friend. And so that day when that doesn't happen anymore, that may be something that I'm like really sets me off. The flip side though, which is encouraging, is that our reasons for living are as varied and as subjective. So there's not like this list of things that you have to have in order to want to keep going. I mean, again, back to my own thing. My youngest cat is approaching 4 years old. Cats live 20 years. I've got 16 years circled on my calendar because that's my reason for living. I have I'm in too many social groups on social media where the whole point of the social media group is rescuing the pets that aging people have passed on and left, that are some usually older, and they can't find homes for them. And so I'm like, well, the last thing I want to do is do that to my kids, right? So ultimately that becomes a really subjective. I'm going to be walking around with no arms and no legs and just sliding across the floor or something, going, here, kitty, kitty, kitty.
And the kitty will come.
And the kitty will come. Well, one of them, Luna, will come.
Luna will come.
The others are decided. The others defer to her. They only get to come in with her permission.
Well, that's an interesting perspective, and and trying to help those people. There's like the police departments that talk people off of ledges and talk people off of bridges, but I think in most instances they're using just a very cut and dry technique of doing that, and it's a lot more complicated than that. I think as a society we need to try and help people in that state see something on the horizon.
That sense of hope becomes real important. And whenever you're talking to anybody who's kind of sharing their shattered dream, which is a big step of courage, by the way. Shattered dreams don't make good dinner time conversation. And so if you've connected to a person to the extent where you can talk about, wow, you seem really sad, what's going on? And they say, well, the person I thought I was going to spend my life with just left, and I'm older. I don't think I've got the ability to, just kind of pick it up and insert the next partner into the mix. And I'm really lonely and I'm worried and I don't know what to do. If they're able to talk about that, that's courage. And so you've already got a leg up on solving. And the technique is kind of systematic. It is, and we've actually, back in my other days, I trained a whole bunch of police officers on this technique. But as you suggest, when we get into the hows and the whys, it really breaks down into something different and individual. And so with shattered dreams, I think one of the things that we're thinking about is this could be anything, and as long as it counts for that person as a shattered dream. That's why I tried to scope it down in the beginning, right? It's like it's not just something that gradually slips away, like like your imagined good looks or whatever. It.
I'm sorry.
I thought I was cute. Now I'm pretty sure I'm definitely not, right?
They've been
You know,
lying to me. They've shattered my dream.
day by day,
Yep.
day by day. And it's not just something that you'd like. It's not just a preference thing. It's really something that comes and it hits you hard. It's unexpected, and it lays you out. So I guess we're talking about a left hook or something. But that's the kind of thing that it is, and it could be anything. Losses, loss of freedom, loss of a family member, loss of a relationship status, loss of mobility, loss of, but it's typically associated with loss. Your dream was tied to having this, and now it's gone. And now what do you do?
Well, let's hope you move forward as best you can. And if you can't, then you need to reach out. You need to reach out. And you're right, Scott. When they first can verbalize what that loss is, that's the primary step in helping yourself move forward or getting help moving forward.
There's a saying in the 12-step community, and they're talking about denial. And so a person who's codependent in that culture is a person who is inadvertently or maybe actually intentionally helping the person who's an addict to maintain their addiction. Yeah, I'll call in sick for you, honey. I know you were out drinking last night and you don't want to go to work, so I'll go ahead and call in sick for you. Or I'll make sure the house is clean, or I'll pay the bills, or I'll do this, or I'll do that while you're kind of falling apart on me. And there's lots of reasons for that. And some of those are pretty valid reasons. But there's a saying that we use in that world, and it is we talk about the codependent in hell. And the codependent in hell is sitting in hell going, it's not hot and I'm not here.
Well, yeah.
And that may be a necessary step. That's the weird thing about denial. It's just it don't throw out the baby and the bathwater.
I use denial all the time. It makes life so much more interesting. And I don't focus on these petty problems.
Yeah,
like finding myself in hell.
exactly, right. It's if it is what it is.
Right. Well, no, I hate that term. But
But that would be the fifth. That would be the fifth stage. That would be acceptance, right? You'd be like, oh,
exactly.
okay,
Yeah,
it is hot. I am
I'm
here.
I may find myself in hell, but I know it'll be a better place now that I'm here.
I'm like looking in my pocket for my melted credit card, seeing if I've got enough of a limit to buy my way out.
Well, don't worry, there'll be Starbucks on every corner.
Right.
Right.
So, but for the person going through these shattered dreams,
Right.
they're really in a they're in a life changing spot, and as you suggest, we're really talking about a path forward, and
Hopefully,
it's
yes.
not abundantly clear to the person when it first hits.
Right. Absolutely.
One of the stories I heard today at the dog park was a person who's was 7 years old when their father died in a car accident on their way home from work. And they knew that their dad was on driving home, and their dad just never came home, ever. And that 7-year-old person had to had assumed, right? Like we assume that everybody's going to grow up and grow old and die in their sleep. And this 7-year-old all of a sudden had no father, and not only no father, but a tragic end. And he talked about how he had to really do some heavy lifting over a process of years to get to the point. And I said, so did it change you? Are you different today? And it was yes. It was, and you know what it was? It was less trusting of the universe. It was, I'm not willing to fully open myself to this possibility, to a connection, to a moment, to anything, because I've had this yanked away from me, and I know how it feels, and I didn't like how it feels, and so I'm always going to hedge my bets now, and so I'm always going to go slowly into things and be cautious about things, because the last time I loved as hard as I could love, my dad never came home. And that was quite a story.
Well, it is because it all deals with trust, and trust is hard to earn and it's easy to lose. So, when we see lots of people like that in relationships, they get their dreams in a relationship are shattered, and they're very, very slow to even consider another relationship.
I was a basketball player, so I was always ready for the rebound. But you're right. I mean, what's twice, once bitten, twice shy, right?
Well, yeah, possibly. Another thing that hit me is people that lose their faith because if they've lived a faith-based life and existence and they've lost that faith, it's very hard for them to move on. It's as if they believe subconsciously everything they'd ever learned was a lie. I can look at education and say a lot of that was a lie, but I haven't lost my faith that I might not learn something, even from you, Scott.
Well, when I look back on all the crap I learned in high school, right?
Exactly. Exactly.
You bring up spirituality, Justin, and as it turns out, it was kind of like hiding in the shadows of almost every single story.
Hmm.
And as you suggest, it was hiding in a number of different ways. So for some people, they marked their whole aversion to shattered dreams. Like, hey, I've never had a shattered dream because God's on my shoulder, and so that spirituality has served as a protective factor to them not even classifying really bad stuff. Because a couple of people who kind of landed on that spot, I pushed it. So nothing really bad, awful's ever happened. And they were like, yeah, well, this happened and that happened and this happened. And I was like, well, those all could be shattered dreams. But because of their spiritual foundation, they hadn't even classified that way. So they had basically, it's the universe unfolding through God's will, and it's part of the promise that I've gotten and the covenant that I've got with God. And so to that point, it was really helpful. There were other people whose faith was shaken, and that was ultimately part of their challenge in reconstructing, in coming back in and accepting, and in working back into their what does life look like now? Was they had a different relationship and trust level with the universe, with their spirituality. And so it's not that they didn't end up being very spiritual people, but they kind of ended up at the place where the universe isn't necessarily dialed into these intimate single person subjective details. Universe is going to do what the universe does. And some of that stuff may affect me in really adverse ways. But that doesn't mean that the universe is an awful, evil place. It just means that there's a lot of possibility in and it isn't all going to always fall my way. Yeah.
Well, it won't. It's like incarceration. There's still a lot of people that are incarcerated for a long time that believe that they didn't do anything wrong. So now they're either in denial or they've lost full trust in the system.
Well, and ultimately, it's going to become problematic at some level if when freedom hits, they believe that they can just kind of resume activities
Right, right, absolutely.
because what they did was somehow justified.
And what's interesting is I use denial where others use spiritual faith. Same
There you go.
result, same result.
Well, and we may have hit on a future topic because there are parallels,
Yeah,
and one can't help but kind of notice the parallels and say, well, it's kind of a different flavor of ice cream, but it's still ice cream.
it is. I don't have a book, uh, a reference manual, but and that brings up another great topic: parallels. There's parallels to everything, absolutely everything.
There are, it's one of the things we sometimes talk about is like, what is the path up the mountain to making you to living your best life, to being your best self? And we use the mountain analogy because inevitably people believe that to be your best self, you're going to have to do some work. You're going to have to do some hiking. You're going to have to go uphill. It's not going to be like easy. Although, your best life could be a slacker, in which case, what's on TV?
Yeah.
But that analogy is always kind of suggests a single path. And the reality is you could trail break, you could use a really well-established path, you could use a path that the goats had taken, and there might even be an elevator somewhere. And you may be able to go in the elevator and come out at the top of the mountain and be like, okay, I'm here. But those multiple ways of getting to something, I think, are important in terms of our own health, our own wellness, our own survival.
Well, I agree, and I think all those paths can be fulfilling because we know people that would only go up the mountain if they could take the path that had never been taken, the most dangerous. And then we know people that are fulfilled by getting in the elevator, taking the express elevator to the top because they can celebrate how smart they are,
Or lucky.
or lucky that they found the elevator. But it's different, and that's what's amazing in what you did professionally, Scott, because there's so many variables. I mean, so many variables.
And it's hard. I think the challenge is honoring the variables and maintaining the structure of the formula at the same time. And that takes a little bit of you have to step away from yourself. Interestingly, that was something that came up in the Shattered Dreams discussion with more than one person. And that was the Shattered Dream forced me to take a step back, look at the bigger picture, and understand that it wasn't all about this desire or this dream or about me. That and that was something that came up fairly commonly, was that, oh, I'm a part of a bigger thing that's swirling around, and it wasn't orbiting around me.
Well, that was a wonderful gift for those people. I mean, that realization gave them hope, and that was the hope that was on the horizon.
And they're very appreciative of that. That was the other thing I noticed was people have been through some awful, horrible things. We're talking in very appreciative terms of how those things had given them a broader perspective, had given them a deeper maturity into the process, and maybe help them not to form kind of false attachments. You're attached to like a mirage, and when the mirage fades away, all of a sudden you're heartbroken. So I think, on the one side there's well, are they guarded, are they being more careful, have they lost some trust? On the other side of the thing, there's this, hey, this is realistic. and ultimately, I what was Hitchhiker's Guide to the Universe. It all ends in tears, and being able to embrace and accept that instead of kind of really stubbornly hanging on to something that your well-being is dependent upon. I'm going to be happy. I'm going to be okay as long as this dream keeps marching along. And if the dream stops marching along, you're left in a real dangerous spot almost, because you'd put so much belief into this continuance, and the continuance was speculative at best.
Well, Scott, why do people, I'll put you in this category, tend to be happy as opposed to people that tend to be unhappy? For me, it's a better place to be. There's less stress, there's less anger. It's just a healthier environment for me. And I have trouble relating to people that are forever angry about one thing or another or depressed about one thing or another.
I was a very angry, reactive person until Bobby McFerrin came out with that song. Do, do, do.
That song was
Or
out.
maybe it was or maybe it was Farrell's song. I don't know.
Well, no, no,
Come
no.
on, Gay.
Bobby Mc, that song came out. I had been spending about 6 months in intensive care, so it really didn't strike me.
Don't worry, be happy.
Yeah, don't worry, be happy. But one thing I will say for those that haven't found themselves in that type of isolation, what I focused, my thoughts were regrets, and not the regrets for me, but regrets for how I had harmed or mistreated others. So I focused on my own persona, and I actually believed when it was all said and done, I came out of it a better human being, more
Like
compassionate.
coach put me back in the game. I'm going to lead the team in assists.
No, it was more or less "Wake, I'll be damned." I survived. But that being said, Bobby McFerrin, that song, now it's haunting me.
Oh yeah, he was a clever vocalist, if nothing else.
You're well, so
So I'm misanthropic enough that happiness has always been viewed with a good fair degree of suspicion for me, because it's always like the prize that they're dangling in front of me to get me to work harder. I sometimes feel like the donkey, and happiness is like holding the stick, and it's got a carrot and it's holding it in front of my nose, and I just keep trundling forward on the promise of the carrot. And so I've always been a little bit suspicious, to be honest. But
well, and maybe
I
you're,
am very much in favor of feeling okay.
yeah. Well, you get endorphin released by laying on a bed of nails, so a lot of us can't relate to your perspective.
Yeah, so I'm a little cautious of happiness, because happiness could be a brand new car with $600 a month payments, and everything else that goes with that. Happiness has become a commodity in many respects, and it's sold to us, and that might be one of the ways. So when we talk about how people are coming out of the backside of a shattered dream, we talked about rebound relationships. One of the things that a natural stage could be, just part of your denial could be doubling down and going harder into some, so my shattered dream died, and now I'm gonna like reinvest double on something that's even less likely to happen, and that's kind of dangerous. Again, it's nice to kind of think about whenever something really dramatic happens in our lives. Take a deep breath,
Yeah.
relax, think about it. Unless the light just turned red and you need to stop the vehicle, you know, unless there's some behavioral imperative that says you need to do something right now to keep yourself safe. It's really about stopping and kind of letting it wash over you, and putting it in perspective, because it doesn't feel like perspective when the dream gets shattered. It feels like that was everything,
Well,
and it wasn't everything.
that's great advice, Scott, even for people that quicken to anger. That deep breath is a good coping mechanism.
Oh yeah, and anger is a really natural response to shattered dream. You know, hey, if you can fight your way through denial, then
Go to anger?
then you're well, yeah, because you're mad at the universe, you're mad at the situation, you're mad at the girl who broke up with you, you're mad at the Tigers for not signing you to that contract. You're whatever that shattered dream was. You're angry at that they did that to you. And it becomes personal.
Well, it is personal because in reality, we are ultimately responsible for where we find ourselves.
And I think that's the backside of anger. Being an angry person isn't. I mean, I don't know how many people like. Oh, I enjoy being angry. I love that pounding heart. I love the blood pressure. I love the ulcers and the stomach problems that come from being angry all the time. I don't know very many people who are going to copy that. There's a few, but but ultimately, anger is self-destructive. It hurts you as bad as it hurts everybody who is around you and has to kind of suffer along with as you act stuff out. So ultimately, getting in touch with that anger and embracing it, give it a hug, right?
Well, I think,
Let's say, hey, I've got every right to be angry about this, and I'm just tired of being angry, and so I'm going to put that away for now and take a deep breath, let it go, and that's a step forward.
that's a great antidote, but I have known a lot of people that don't realize that they're angry. It's such a common behavior for them. They just think it's another day. And those are the people I'm really concerned about, not for me, but certainly for themselves. So it's as if it's a out of body experience. They wake up angry, they go to bed angry, and they don't
You know,
realize it.
Pardon my French, but I saw a bumper sticker the other day that said, "I'd rather be pissed off than pissed on," and
Well,
and and I was like, we're it's like this is not some philosophy insight that we're gonna get tattooed on our arm, hopefully. You know, you don't realize what being angry does to you in the long run, let alone your loved ones, right? Let alone the people around you, let alone your community. It tears. It is really, really toxic,
well, yeah, and if you get stung,
and it doesn't fix anything.
right, and if you get stung by a jellyfish, you're going to be asking strangers to piss on
Indeed, amazingly curative in some respects.
you. But yeah, it's, people, we all need to be in better touch with ourselves, and because it just makes it easier. And you are a happier person than you realize, Scott.
Well, because what? So, I mean, to me, everybody gets to. Yeah, I'm actually working on an essay on this, and so let's take a little sidetrack. Self, all the things that we use to identify kind of the narrative that we're going through. So how am I going to act right now based on who I am as a person? That self is a fictional construct. We're making it up. The only person who really holds all of that information, who is writing the book, is me.
All right.
So everybody is self creating every given moment. And I think that for me, rolling back to why I may appear to be sometimes a little bit happy, um, is because I've kind of come to terms with the fact that I'm self-creating this. And why would I want to self-create a bummer? You know
Well,
what I mean?
exactly.
And there are a million bummers. there are a lot of very scary, sad, awful things going on in the world at any given instant. And that's one of the reasons why I have the arm span rule, where I'm not going to get too engrossed or worked up or distressed about things that are outside of my immediate control, because that's a deep and dangerous path. Um, I value okay,
Yeah.
and there's not much that isn't going to bounce me off of okay for more than just a minute or two, right? I coming to do the show today. I was hustling down the street, and a guy cut me off without a turn signal, and then he slowed his way through the yellow light so that I had to stop at the red light, and it cost me like 5 minutes. For a second there, I wasn't okay.
Well,
I
yeah,
was like, dude with the blacked out windows on your truck, that was not cool. And then I was like,
well, even with regard to this show, Scott, there's not a lot of people that could co-host with me and put up with me and what might come out of my mouth for an hour and still enjoy it.
I love it because you are not afraid of your perspective.
No matter how
And
warped it
I'm not
is.
afraid, and I'm not afraid of mine.
Right.
And both of us have put a little thought into our perspective. So even when we're on different pages in terms of where we ended up on, you're teaching me stuff, and maybe I'm teaching you stuff, and that's what I like. I really think that that's the value of the show at the end of the day.
Well, absolutely. And I
Is
am learning stuff and learning new perspectives. And you provide some pretty meaty topics. We're not talking about cooking cream stuff, brulee, but we're trying to
that was that was next week's show.
oh, cream brulee with Scott and Justin. There you go,
Actually, that's pretty delicious stuff. I mean, I ain't gonna lie. Properly browned, properly like toasted on top.
with a blowtorch only. But yeah, so
No, but these are the fun topics, right? These are the
yeah,
ones that, because they are so deep and there are so many angles, there's plenty of insights that are just kind of hiding.
right, right. It's just we react and we share, and hopefully it's helping people out there, and it's certainly helping both of us, I believe.
Oh, absolutely. So, shattered dreams. I mean, one of the things that came up was the concept of goalposts.
Yeah,
So the shattered dream was kind of basically at the end of the day, after they kind of worked through all their anger, hurt, and well, I'll be a good boy this time, it'll work, or God, I'm so tired I'm sad about this that I'm not, I'm going to stop trying. All of those are natural responses. At the end of the day, when they came to the thing, it was like, you know what? I'm going to move the goalposts. I've been trying 70-yard field goals. I'm going to move it and pull it back a little bit and try a 25-yard field goal. And that moving the goalposts was all it took for them to find kind of renewed satisfaction with life.
interesting.
And I was like, that works.
That's interesting. They've changed their perspective so they can move on, and that's an interesting concept, Scott.
Kind of like what we've said about happiness a couple times on this show is if you're not happy, lower your expectations. The bar is too high.
Peter's principle has settled in.
Yeah. But and there's some validity to that. I mean, if the people I was talking to had I talked to a couple people on permanent disability, and so they were never going to be able to go back to the self they had envisioned. It was gone forever, and many of the things that they'd wanted that were attached to that self were no longer available or accessible. So they were never, going to be able to get married. They were never going to be able to have a family. They were never going to be able to have that career that they really wanted to. One person, the impairment was visual. They were never going to be able to read a book again. And don't talk to me about books on tape. It ain't the same thing. And so these losses that they'd experienced were very significant. So just to have them say that they were able to move the goalposts was, in a way, very reassuring, because these were unimaginably catastrophic things, and just total game changers. And these people were like, this is here, this is now, this is what I've got, and this is how I'm going to cope with it. And that is at the end of the process. You don't do that day one morning cup of coffee. Okay, I'm all right now.
Well, I agree, Scott. I mean, I don't want to give the impression that I haven't had setbacks, and sometimes I need to step back and sort out things, and that allows me to start moving forward. But I'm
You
not
just said you woke up in the ICU. I mean, to me, that's somewhere on the list. Sir.
something new. This is new.
And you were pleasantly surprised to be alive. So,
Well, exactly. It's all the perspective that you take. And there were a lot of people trying to keep me alive, and I never did come to terms with that, but I do accept their help.
well, so far so good.
Well, yeah, yeah. Well, it depends on who you ask. But so the reassessment and self-assessment is something we all need to work on, and heighten those skills in ourselves to be happier, more content. That's why doing this show helps me in all those facets. And I do get to hear your perspective, and most of them are perspectives that would never have come into my mind, but some of them are very valuable perspectives to consider.
The gift for me is having worked with so many people and had such access. I feel like a cub reporter sometimes. People will share parts of themselves that I haven't experienced,
Right.
that have such relevance, such insight. Sometimes they're so powerful, the stories. Um, they're people who are in recovery. One of the things I walk around just kind of slapping myself in the face sometimes. Man, these people are so much more courageous than I am, because I can't even imagine having to go through half of what they've gone through, and they're still getting up in the morning and still trying their best and still trying to get their heads around stuff, and walk the baseball analogy. They're below the Mendoza line. They're hitting 183, and they're coming up and facing incredibly good pitching, and they're walking up with a smile on their face to the plate. And when I see that stuff like that happen, I'm like, whoa, it really. But I also keep records. I also remember, and I'm like, oh, okay. If this happens, this is the way that some people deal with it.
When I played a lot of baseball, when I coached baseball, and when the dogs would bark at my coaching ability, I would see a 14 or 15-year-old that I was coaching go up in a very stressful situation in a baseball game, and I would call timeout, and everybody wondered what I was going to be saying to him, and it was very consistent. What I almost always said was, "Don't you just love it?" And they'd say, "What do you mean, coach?" I said, "Don't you just love this moment in time?" I said, "This is a remarkable opportunity. Why don't you just step back, take a deep breath, and take it in, and just enjoy this moment, because it really doesn't matter how this moment turns out, but you don't get that many of these types of moments in your life." And I walked away.
Nice.
And I walked away because that's what it was all about. And that's what sport is all about. And I think they all appreciated that moment, sharing that realization with them, because it wasn't, in sport, if you're passionate about your sports team, the sun's still going to come up tomorrow, no matter what happens.
No, you know what? You win a gold star for that one. I would call timeout, and I would walk out, and I would tell a joke about passing gas. And we do it like with a super straight face, like this is the most important thing in the world, and I would come out like totally serious, and then I would deadpan some like ridiculous non sequitur kind of totally unrelated thing, and then half the people would just It wouldn't help at all.
Yeah.
Some of the people would get mad at me, and other people would be like, "Oh, they would it would break set enough that they were able to kind of come back to that spot that you were trying to get them to."
No, I was giving them a life lesson, and you were teaching them a joke that they could tell their grandkids, right?
Right? Well, no, they weren't that good.
No, but I promise you, it stuck with some of them, and
Scott jokes, dad jokes.
Scott jokes. All right. Well, what else did you? You must have gotten something else from the dog park that would have surprised us both.
Yeah, it was really they helped formulate this. The production crew this week helped formulate the need for, okay, this is a disappointment, not a shattered dream. So setting the bar, and I think that's important because if we walk around and every misfortune or every moment of fate that wasn't quite how we wanted it to happen is classified as a shattered dream, that's going to beat us up at the end of the day. So one of the things that the group worked through really well was shattered dreams are big, and that we need to kind of keep that framework and establish it so that people aren't mistaking not getting something you wanted for a shattered dream. And so but then realizing and validating the fact that shattered dreams happen. And I think that was really the whether it was an unexpected death in the family, whether it was the person who grew up wanting to be a cop their whole life. And everybody said you're going to be a great cop. And Halloween we dressed up in police uniforms, and all of a sudden it just never happened. And it never happened. And then one day that person woke up and said, I'm not going to be a cop. This was so fundamental to who I was as a person growing up. And I just kind of thought it was going to happen. And now I'm pretty sure it's not. And that to them was a shattered dream, because their whole kind of identity as who they were going to be, and careers are big that way, for many people.
Well,
It was gone, and they had to come to and they got really depressed. So what it did was it kind of spawned this miasma, this I just don't feel like doing anything. I don't want to, and that lasted for years. So for 3 or 4 years, this person was just kind of floating. They had people paying their bills, they had people giving them food, they had people giving them shelter, and they just kind of sat around and maybe they did a little, light housekeeping or some supportive stuff, but they hadn't re-engaged with who they were and how they were going to express it.
And I think there were a lot of shattered dreams. And I hate to bring up the pandemic, but when the vaccines became mandatory in lots of arenas, police arenas in California, medical arenas, there were a lot of people that decided to leave their careers to avoid having to take the vaccine to protect what they thought were their families, including 10% of the Mayo Clinic employees. A good friend of mine was a police officer in San Francisco, and he took his family away for that same reason, having no clue what he was going to do. But it came to him, and he became a motivational speaker, and he developed talents that he never knew he had. But he preserved his integrity with regard to how he wanted to raise his family, if you can imagine. And I looked at people with that type of courage, and I don't know that I could have developed it. But their dreams were shattered.
Even the people getting the vaccines were courageous, because there wasn't any guarantee that this wasn't going to either not help or actually hurt.
No, absolutely, absolutely. But
we were all guinea pigs in the moment.
Yep. And but I look at those people's courage, and their dreams were shattered. But they came out, most of them came out doing very well, and as a testament to their character, I guess, Scott.
It's with COVID. It's interesting because that 3 or 4 year period, and it's still not, it's still messing people up, but they talk about it a little bit less now. But that 3 or 4 year period of kind of trying to cope with it and avoid even greater losses than we suffered was game changing, depending a lot on where you were developmentally. You know, were you in your mid 50s? It probably was something, but it wasn't that bad. There were certain stresses for sure. Were you 18? Were you 16 years old and you had to go to lockdown for 4 years? Those are 4 pretty darn important years, and it's like 1/5 of your life when you're that age.
Well, I would have survived on my skills of sneaking out of the house and sneaking back into the house to survive that, but I can't imagine. I can't imagine not going stir crazy, particularly as a teenager.
Well, but and having all of those, to get to my dream, I have to sequence this in a certain order, and all of a sudden, all the things that I need to continue that pathway aren't available anymore
Yeah.
because of lockdown, and that was hard. I'm sure that that's going to wash out over the next 10, 15 years. We're going to have to kind of the birds are going to come home to roost in terms of what we lost and how we cope with where we go from there.
Right. Absolutely. And, hopefully, society will recover. We just don't know how.
For society to recover, it would have had to have been healthy before COVID, and that's a coin toss.
But I remember my grandfather talking about the Spanish flu when he was in tractor school in Kansas City, and half the school died.
Yeah, yeah. My half of my grandfather's family died. Half of his siblings died.
And they got in their car and went back to Iowa. So it's just, we've always dealt with these types of things and always will. We just don't know what's coming down the road.
And it's interesting generationally to be open to the fact that people are carrying some stuff that's pretty weighty. One of my friend's parents was a Korean War vet, and they were on the death march through the winter snows and stuff, and they never talked about it,
Right.
but they had really bad dreams.
Well, they did, and
And yeah,
some of them did, and some of them didn't. A good friend of mine served some of the worst duty in Vietnam, and his brother did too. Now, my friend came back not understanding why his brother was having such a problem transitioning back to society. And that's what haunted him. Why didn't it affect him and it affected his brother so?
yeah, that came up in the shattered dreams discussion very strongly. It's like one person's shattered dream was another person's Wednesday.
Yeah, exactly. Perspective.
And it's difficult to, so ultimately, if you're sitting at home going, am I one of those people that's immune to this? It's really difficult to predict. And ultimately, I would say it's probably better to assume that at some point you're going to have shattered dreams, and kind of set up in advance, set up the reality that this is going to throw me for a loss. And then I'm going to go back in the huddle, and I'm going to call another play. Maybe I need to call timeout and have Justin come out and talk to me or something. But I'm going to end up having to call another play
I grew up in a
and try to
household.
get that first.
My mother used to treat me when I was a small child as this too will pass. And that was truer words have never been spoken. It's how we recover from it and how we move on. Because one thing we're all assured of is we don't know what tomorrow is, and it will change.
I got that message from my mom as well. And then my grandparents were more like Like if I remember once I dropped an outboard motor on my thumb, and my I was like just howling. It hurt. It hurt.
Oh yeah, it would. Smashed hands back.
Oh, it was only like a 4 horsepower. I mean, thank goodness. But that's still a heavy thing. And so I was howling, and my grandfather looked down at me from up on the dock, and he said, "You know what? That didn't hurt me a bit."
Yeah, exactly.
And it actually shut me up right away. It was like, oh, wait a minute, this is really localized. I'm the only one feeling pain right now. But the other thing he would say is, ask yourself, in 200 years, is this going to make any difference?
Right.
And if the answer is no, then take a deep breath and find yourself, get grounded.
He was telling you, toughen up, Buttercup.
Well, but he's pointing out a really important point,
Yes.
and that is that time literally will cure all wounds, because ultimately there isn't much that's happening right now in my life, at least, that in 200 years anybody's going to notice or care about. And accepting that allows me to kind of take life's bumps, even if it's to the level of a shattered dream, with more perspective.
Well, what if, Scott, have you ever thought that 200 years from now, AI will find these videos in an archive somewhere and they'll actually give them credence?
I'm just hoping that maybe they can send the royalties to purgatory or wherever we end up. Maybe I can buy my way out of purgatory, right?
Well, maybe, but it'll be a better place once you get there, Scott. Why don't you give us a final thought and we'll put this one in the bag?
All right, I got a final thought. So, just it'd be nice to kind of live a charmed life, and you may in fact do that, and that is really cool. And write a book about it, because the rest of us would like to be in that same spot. So the odds are pretty good you're going to have at least one, and probably several, shattered dreams throughout the course of your life. And what we've seen is that there's a process of recovery. It's going to work with denial. It's going to work with anger. None of these are really negative. It's going to work with bargaining. Come on home, I'll be a good boyfriend forever. And they're not coming back. It's going to work with depression. It's going to work with all of these stages of grief, because it's a process of coming to acceptance. And so each of these is kind of a necessary building block in terms of getting over a shattered dream. But the minute you're starting to feel this way, look for your supports. That may be therapy.
Yeah.
That may be going to a healthcare provider and dealing with that knee that's not going to let you play baseball anymore. That may be going to a financial planning place and dealing with the economic crisis that just cost you your home. It may be talking to your family. It may be talking to your church. It may be reading some really good critical thinking stuff and just plugging this in and working through it. It may be petting Luna. It may be petting the cat. But whatever that is, and it may be all of those, avail yourself to the supports that are around you in nature. And knowing that in 200 years, it will be a non-item. And so if I can get over it in 6 months and get back to trying to be the best human I can be for me, then I will have successfully kind of worked through something that is common life occurrence, even though it is awful, even though it feels like there's not going to be a tomorrow. And that's kind of the key to it. Hey, you want to tease next week's show? I got an idea.
Oh, well, it must be a good one. Let's do it.
This one's interesting. How much is enough? When is enough enough? And we can look at that through a lot of different things. So if you're one of those people who are now lining up behind us and, hey, I want to catch the show this week, start thinking about in your life, in all the different areas, wealth, relationships, cream, what's the cheesecake? Sorry, it took me a second there. How much is enough? And how do we begin to have a relationship with our enough button? Because there's a lot of influences that say it's never enough. You've got to keep going. There's always more. You know, we think about that, and then we'll talk about it. And I'll obviously roll it out to the dog park, and they'll have plenty of thoughts, and we'll go from there.
Well, sounds like a good idea, Scott. Hey, everybody, this has been Just In Case. Scott Dudley and Luna bringing you American consciousness with a little help from the dog park. Thanks for joining us. Remember, additional information and links are provided in this video's Read More. Today's the day to subscribe to this channel. Please learn more about Scott when time permits.